Good morning, everybody. I'll bring this special council meeting to order on Tuesday, June the 25th, 2024 at 9 a.m. and to acknowledge that we are in the traditional territory of Stahelis. Next order of business, please.
The next order of business is introduction of late items.
Any late items? None being. Next order of business, please.
The next order of business is approval of the agenda.
Thank you. We don't need a seconder for what we do for this part, I believe. Yes, thank you. Moved by Councillor Vidal, second by Councillor Jackson. Call the question. All in favour? Nobody opposed? Thank you.
Well, just a second, Mr. Mayor, discussion on the motion, please. Point of order.
Approval of the agenda.
Yes, you have a motion to approve and a seconder. I wish to discuss the motion.
We already passed it. It's been
No, we
voted on.
didn't.
Been voted on.
No, just a second, Mr. Mayor. Point of order.
I've moved over to the next order of business,
Mr. Mayor, I object to the approval of the agenda and I demand my time to state my objection.
You didn't bring that up when I called the question.
You called the question and immediately announced approval. You need to vote. I didn't see anybody voting.
We'll move on to the next order of business, please.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, point of order. A councillor is entitled to discuss a motion on the floor.
As
You
I,
did not give me the opportunity to discuss the motion on the floor because I object to the inclusion of the last two items, the last three items on the agenda. They were not items which were referred to the committee of the whole. If the committee of the whole is to discuss an item, it requires them to be sent to the committee of the whole by the council. These three items were not sent.
Councillor Allen, you made your point of order.
You disallowed me the opportunity to speak to the motion, Mr. Mayor, and that's completely wrong.
I did not. I called approval of the agenda. Nobody spoke up. And I called the question.
I raised
Thank you.
my hand to be
No, you didn't.
recognized to speak,
Sorry.
and you ignored me.
I was looking at you because I asked introduction of late items. You said nothing. You had your hand on the button.
No,
You said nothing. And then approval of the agenda. When I called it, you also said nothing till I passed it.
I said nothing, but when you got the motion and the seconder, I raised my hand to be recognized so I could speak against the motion. And you refused to recognize me. I'm a councillor. I'm elected. You have to allow me.
Instead
the
of getting
opportunity to
into a
speak.
big discussion, I want to get through the agenda this morning. I would allow you to bring up that point. Please bring it up and then we will vote on it. Your 2 points is the last two items.
Mr. Mayor, what I'm trying to tell you is that when it comes to the approval of the agenda, that requires a vote of council, at least a majority vote, preferably a unanimous vote. In this case, I'm objecting to the inclusion of items 4C, D, and E. On 4E, I believe that is an ongoing project, the Dyke update, which has been before the public, and the public expects to see that discussed at a regular meeting. And that's where it should be discussed, not here at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Similarly, the village office update has not been before council recently and was not referred to this committee of the whole meeting to be discussed, and therefore it should be part of a regular meeting. Similarly, with item E on the oak trees, that has been discussed in public at a regular meeting, and that's where the discussion should continue. To put it at a 9 a.m. Tuesday meeting is hiding the issue and denying the public the right to see council's deliberation on it. So I object to all three of those because they don't belong on the committee of the whole agenda since they were not sent to this committee by the council. Thank you.
Are you making a motion to that?
Well, I didn't make the motion. The motion was made by Councillor Vidal, seconded by Councillor Jackson. What I'm doing is I'm objecting and protesting against the motion.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Well, we have to vote.
All in favor of the agenda as amended, as amended? Is that what you're requiring, Mr.
I would
Councillor?
prefer that.
Okay, so we have, first of all, if you want the agenda as approved first, or the agenda as amended first? Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Casio. So there's a motion on the table for approval of the agenda. And then is the amendment to remove items 4C, D, and E? Is that your amendment? Councillor Allen?
My amendment is that items 4C, D, and E be removed from the agenda.
Okay. So we could vote on the amendment and then return to the regular
Okay.
motion. Please,
Thank you. So on the amendment, we don't need a second, we do, we've got a move and a seconder. Is there a move and a seconder on the amendment?
Mover.
Is there a seconder? There's no seconder, so the motion fails. Now back to the original approval of the agenda. We had it was moved by Councillor Vidal, I believe. There's no, Councillor Jackson seconded it. On the approval of the agenda, all in favor? Opposed?
Opposed.
Councillor Allen opposed, motion passes. Thank you. Next order of business, please.
The next order of business is committee of the whole items for discussion, and the first recommendation is that council resolve itself into a committee of the whole.
Moved by Councillor Vidal. You need a second for this one? Second by Councillor Jackson. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Nobody? Thank you. And the next order of business.
The next order of business is Harrison Water Sports Commercial Merge Tenure Proposal, and we have representatives from Harrison Water Sports here to present.
Thank you. So, Shendel family, whoever wants to come up and make a presentation. There's a little button on the side of the other side, the button that you press in. Should have a red light come on. Yeah, there you go.
Sorry. I don't know if you worked that. Apologies. Good morning. Okay. I have a little introduction if I'm allowed to read that to everybody.
Oh,
Maybe move forward with a small presentation. Okay, thank you. Good morning, Your Worship and members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today regarding our tenure application for Harrison Water Sports. Since our establishment in Harrison back in 1996, we have been committed to contributing positively to our community. Today, we stand before you, eager to discuss our undetermined future and our desire to secure a lasting presence within this village. Today, we have representatives present who have actively involved in every aspect of this tenure process. They bring with them a wealth of expertise and are prepared to address any questions you may have regarding the respective areas. We have engaged extensively with the village staff addressing their inquiries and concerns. We have compiled comprehensive responses, which you find detailed in the informational handout provided to you. Furthermore, in response to feedback received, we have made adjustments to our original plans, which are clearly depicted in the updated maps also submitted for your review today. If we do not move forward with the opportunity of an alternate location, the future of Harrison's recreational tourism sector will be uncertain, leaving limited options for both the community and our guests to enjoy. Our proposal aims to sustain and enhance recreational opportunities in Harrison, aligning with the village's long-term vision for economic growth and community well-being. We value the input and considerations of the council and the community at large, and we are committed to ensuring that our proposal aligns with the best interests of Harrison and its residents. We look forward to addressing any concerns and questions you may have and to discussing how our continued presence can contribute positively to the vibrant future of our village. Thank you. Nope, we
Yeah.
have, oh,
If
sorry,
you,
go ahead.
if you guys have any questions, like regarding the pamphlet that we gave you, we have.
Yep,
Yeah,
we have all the representatives here, and then we have our consultant Adam on Zoom as well. Yes,
Yeah, we.
And also, Mr. Cossie, our planner, is on Zoom as well, if there's any technical questions regarding the tenure as well, council. So I'll open this up to the floor. Councillors who wish to speak first. Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Facio. Through you to our presenters, I am not opposed to some kind of a proposal that you have put forward. However, I do have one considerable concern. Last weekend, we saw another tremendous successful event, our Sasquatch Days, an annual event in the village. One of the main draws of Sasquatch Days is the war canoe races, which utilize the beach area adjacent to your proposed site and in the water north of the lagoon area. The war canoes have a designated racing course which extends into the lake, including the north side. There is also a dragon regatta scheduled for July 27th, where up to 70 teams compete for medals and ribbons and utilize a very similar racing route. So my question to you is, what would Harrison Hot Water Sports be willing to do to accommodate these two very important events and not impede either war canoe or dragon boat racers? Thank you.
You're meaning like the site where it is, like in the way, is that what you're referring to, the proposed site? Or you're more so talking like when we're moving in and out during those times of the events?
Thank you. I'm more concerned of how your transporting of people would impede the route and the racing route of people involved in these events. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and it's obviously a huge concern. I saw one of the boats, like one of the big boats, almost run into one of those boats that weekend. And so it's really hard, obviously, because there's a lot going on, but we could obviously work around that. Those weekends, we could adjust time slots and have discussion with the regatta and see what their schedule is, and the war races as well. And just adjust our time slots and just make sure that they don't have any conflicting times with them going out and us working as well. The first weekend, like the June 22nd, is usually not very busy at all for us. So the Sasquatch Days, I wouldn't see it being concerned, but obviously the regatta, it's a little bit more busy. But the regatta usually goes east to west. So we can skirt the beach area and be out of their way for the full time when they're doing their races. When they come into the beach is the only time that there would be an issue. And I would just make sure all our staff know about that and they're out of the way.
Thank you. That's helpful. Nothing further at this time, Deputy Mayor Facio.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to? Councillor Allen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've got a number of questions. And trying to deal with it in chronological order if I can. Can you explain to me how you acquired the adventure tourism tenure that you have in front of the Harrison Hotel for the floating water park? How did that come about? And was your consultant of your current consultant involved in that application?
No, he was not involved. Yeah, Mike is here again. Sorry. Yeah. No, he was not involved. We went through the province. They went through all their channels respectively. Would have went to the village and went to Chehalis and through all the processes. There's a land officer that was assigned to our document. And we went through everything, all due processes through the government channels on the province's side.
So what you're telling me is that the village approved the location of the floating water park in that location and your tenure?
Yeah, the land officer would have had discussion with the village, and the village and the land officer would have discussed that and would obviously approve that. It is a venture tourism, so it's a little bit different than any other tenures. And it's not on a foreshore, so it's kind of really no different than the river rafting tenure that laps over your guys' license of occupation. And that's all I can really say on that side of thing.
Do you want to see if Adam has anything? We can also-
Adam, do you, Adam can also answer anything more if anything more in regards to this.
So at that time, did the Harrison Hotel approve of that tenure?
Yeah, we got support from the Harrison Hotel in a letter, as well as Tourism Harrison, moving forward with our water park.
And how long ago was that?
It's 2015, 2014, 15, around there.
Okay, about 9 or 10 years ago then. So my problem with this is that I watched the Harrison Floating Water Park evolve. I watched the council meetings and the council minutes, and I saw no reference to it being approved. When I've asked at the village office as a councillor for any documentation concerning the approval of that, I'm told that there is no such record. So that's why I find it a bit puzzling that that installation has been made, which would appear to be contrary to our zoning bylaw, our official community plan, and other things, and yet there's no village record of that having been officially approved. So that concerns me if it's going to continue there. My supplementary question then would be, if the Harrison Hotel doesn't want your floating water park to be there, as they appear not to want, where will it go? Because they seem very clear that they do not want you to be a tenant on their dock. And when you're not a tenant on their dock, it's possible that the reason for finishing your tenancy there is that they want your water park to be moved as well. Do you have any documentation from the hotel that says that they are happy with the water park being in front of the hotel?
Like I said, we had support in 2015 when we went through the process. On this, your second point there, we are dealing with a 1-year lease. There's no, you're assuming that they don't want us there, but we as a business are trying to like grow and have something more than a 1-year lease. Moving forward, we already have our license of occupation, and we wouldn't be impeding anything other than obviously the view to the hotel. But I think it's a great asset still for the community and the hotel, because it brings a lot of revenue in for them. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't said that the hotel won't continue to give us 1-year leases. It's just as a business, and any business at that, how can you grow and prosper when you don't know if you'll run the next year? That is in their hands. So what we're just trying to seek is an opportunity to have some longevity. So we know that we have a permanent place here in the village, so we can continue to give the community and all the visitors of Harrison a chance to have fun with their families.
Yeah, that being seasonal, like we have to replace tens of thousands of dollars worth of infrastructure and equipment. And also we have to hire up to 40 staff members that are all from the local community. And we have to do that starting in pretty much December. And our lease is renewed in May. So we hire 40 staff on hopes that we can get a contract signed year to year. And that's the struggle.
Okay, well, let me just tell you that if I was the Harrison Hotel and I was charging $500 or $600 a night for lakefront rooms, and people show up who have previously enjoyed an uninterrupted view of the beauty of Harrison Lake and the islands beyond, I would be upset if I checked into my room and found I was looking at a water park. To me, that is not what Harrison is about. In my opinion,
Excuse
The
me,
biggest-
Councillor Allen, if I may interrupt for a second, we're not here to criticise the views from rooms or whatever. just if you can get to the main points to ask the questions in regards to their proposal. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I was trying to explain my concerns before asking the next question. Were you aware that the Harrison floatplane dock is supposed to be quite a bit longer than it currently is because several sections are missing? It's not on your plans here. You show the current dock, but you don't show the tenure that we have where the dock is supposed to extend to and where it needs to be restored to that length. Were you aware of that?
I'm actually thinking you're wrong on that. I think that the floatplane dock is out of your reservoir lot lease, because if you take a Google map overlay on that tenure, you can see that the floatplane dock is clearly out of your lease there. If you go on the Tantalus map, you can see that it's actually out of your water lot.
Well, I disagree. The tenure that you're showing in your maps is the old Charlie Wilson dock tenure. We have a new tenure for our floatplane dock. It's called a water aerodrome or something, and it goes a lot further out than the old Charlie Wilson dock. So your map is not correct on that.
Yeah, I'm aware that that broke off years ago. Steve is here who replaced that portion of the dock due to ice buildup. But from my knowledge, the dock on the Tantalus, which should be up to date through BC Ministry, it shows your guys' dock clearly a little bit out of that box. That's all I'm referring to.
Well, having built the floatplane dock, I know where it extends to. I know what tenure that we have for it, should have for it. So your operational plan then is to load all these people up at the lagoon and then transport them across to the current location of the water park. Is that right?
Yeah, so right now we're working off of the Hotel Foreshore. We move 600 to 800 people a day to and from. It's about the same distance roughly than where we're taking. If you drew a line around the hotel marina, it'd actually be a lot safer for us because it would be less boat traffic due to the rental company that is in that area. We can kind of go more out onto the lake and go directly into the water park. And then we're away from the beach and be out more towards the slow zone markers. But yes, we would be taking people from the dock and off of the dock area and having it all contained within those dock structures.
Okay. I'm quite concerned about the statement that you had about periodic vehicle traffic. In order to fuel all your, I presume all the jet skis will move over there as well. And you have, I believe, a dozen of those, the Sea-Doos.
Yeah, we do have those Sea-Doos. We obviously have in our original document, like obviously once we get electricity, the Sea-Doos that are comfortable renting all day, we'd like to transition to that. But as of now, we would have to transfer fuel, but we can do other means of that. Like we can transfer fuel cans by the lake. There's a fuel dock on Killers Cove Marina. There's other ways around that. Like we don't have to be transferring fuel cans by land. There's always a workaround to the situation.
Well, fuel is another concern of mine because that particular beach that lies between the plaza and the floatplane dock is supposed to be our best beach that we have in Harrison Lake. It was at one point either designated or trying to be designated as a blue flag beach. And to have a marina located there with craft moored and fuel bothers me because any fuel spill that would happen there would probably circulate into that bay and contaminate that beach. And in your description in this, where you've talked about the fueling of the Sea-Doos, you say that any spill would go into the footwell of the Sea-Doos, which seems to suggest that it would be trapped there and be secure. But that's not the case because the footwell of the Sea-Doo is open to the water and the fuel would drain straight into the water when you're sitting, as you are currently parked, at a slope up your ramp, any water going out of the gas can into the footwell is going to go straight back into the lake, isn't it?
No, the Sea-Doo jet skis, it's actually, this footwell holds water. You can hold up to, like I said, that in that thing, 20 liters or more. If you spilt that whole gas can by accident, the nozzle came off and you sat there and held it upside down, which would never happen, because if you're spilling, you would notice that it would be completely contained. You're at level. The Sea-Doos have a huge footwells on either side to collect that.
Docks are not ramped either.
Yeah, our docks are flat. They drive up and they're on up a flat
they're
area.
level. They're not slanted, so they wouldn't be spilling into the lake.
Page 7, you say that you will require minimal periodic vehicle access for maintenance. So are you proposing that your vehicles will enter the beach at the boat launch parking lot and drive around the outer lagoon to your facility to carry fuel and equipment and staff or whatever?
So what we're referring to, that like our water park install is quite big. It's a big job. We have 3 big structures that are over 3,000 pounds that we can't manually move. So there's one morning in the spring and one afternoon in the fall that we need to have a location just to crane those ones down, and then we float them over to the dock and then go put them in place. Everything else is fulfilled through the boat launch. Like I said, we can transport via water to the boat launch to access the marina. And I think we once we have that dock structure there, we wouldn't need vehicle access moving forward. Yeah, go ahead.
Also, when we were having communications with village staff, that was one of their concerns, was the berm and our cranes being on it. But what we were never asked during all of the communication was if there was alternatives, other options. And there are other options to be able to use the crane without having to use the berm. But we were never asked that. So there are things like a barge, you have cabins that are built down the lake that have the excavators that are, transported out there. We could do the exact same thing. There's other ways around it if that was a concern of the villages.
Well, I wasn't really thinking about the annual watering and dewatering of the equipment. I was thinking more of daily visits by pickup trucks full of fuel out to your proposed marina.
Like I said, we can fuel from the lake. We can get fuel on the lake. That's an option.
Right now, too, we don't have any vehicles that drive up to our marina, to where the hotel marina is. They're actually just transported from the truck with a dolly safely down to the marina to be put away. So there is no trucks that are driving currently up to where we are. So we could do the exact same process and not be in anyone's way.
So can you just explain to me a bit more about this adventure tourism application? I've actually read the 58 pages of the government's land use operational policy. And what I see in this, from reading this document and from having been involved in the preparation of these policies back when I was at a high level of tourism in the province of BC, the adventure tourism policy was designed for very low impact tourism experiences, such as launching canoes or kayaks, launching float tubes, maybe having a guide boat for hunters, things that didn't have a permanent impact on the environment or the setting, or were only here and gone, but not set there permanently. And what I see is that the land use operational policy of adventure tourism doesn't apply to what you have built. And that's why I'm asking how that got approved. Because for you to come in and build the marina that you're talking about, it will certainly not qualify under adventure tourism. It's really a water park or a tourist attraction or an activity center. And that requires a completely different tenure. So are you suggesting that the marina that you're proposing to build would qualify under adventure tourism?
Yeah, so I've talked to our consultant. I probably want him to answer this, but we had a conversation with someone very, very high up in the province a couple days ago, and they said that obviously we've put it towards commercial general right now, but she said once it hits someone's desk, which takes a long time, as you can see, because it's almost been a year already, and it may be another year. It will probably lie in adventure tourism. But I can get Adam to talk on this this point. I'd like him to give a little bit more info on this.
I want to make sure I'm not opposed.
Councillor Allen, I'm just going to intervene give an opportunity for Councillor Jackson to ask some questions and we can come back to you. Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Your worship, I really get tired of the total negativity that happens here sometime, and I apologize for that. Mr. Allen actually is a way out of sort because first of all, the Harrison Resort is a family resort. If you go there and see the families that come to this community every day of the week, they bring their children, they love to go to the water park. It's a positive environment. Making sure it's in the right place is what we want to do. I often wondered whether or not you looked at the west side of the floatplane dock there. That might be another way of having it permanently and not having to cross the water over to where your facility is. How you came about your tenure is your business. You're a business. You've been in business for quite some time. It's legal. It's healthy. It has a positive impact. And we could sit here all day long with this counselor and we're not going to hear a positive thing. So take it that all the community isn't that way. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I have some comments to make. First of all, in regards to back to the original proposal, I think you said 215. I do recall it coming to council, but it was just if we were in favour of the proposal, but I think the rest of the applications had to be done through Navigable Waters Canada, I believe, where you're because you're outside the boundaries of the village, and also I'm not sure whether you had to have a business license or not, or did that come under the overall, probably the hotel one, I would think. But anyway, I do recall it coming to the council. But from my personal perspective, I think it's one of the greatest things that ever came to Harrison. People will come to Harrison and say, well, there's not a lot to do here. And, you know, if you had to go to a water park, you went to the one at Bridal Falls for a water park. But this whole setup where it's actually on water, which is something tremendously unusual to have there. But when there's discussions about low-key tourism, well, Councillor Allen will remember we used to have the poker run for many years in Harrison, which created a lot of gas and hundreds of boats shooting off the shores to go around the lake for the big poker run, which was put on, I believe, by the yacht club at the time. And then we used to have the races with the Sea-Doos for many years. So that was stopped because of the noise from residents in other areas. So we've had several high-powered activities on the lake previous to I call this low-key personally, because once they're outside the 10-kilometer zone of the Sea-Doos, then they can take off, I believe. So that's why those 10 kilometers is there. I did have the concerns that Councillor Vidal brought up in regards to the Sasquatch weekend and the dragon boats, because the dragon boats, as you know, they set up a whole village on that side of the lagoon. And it's I mean, these are the logistics have to be sorted out, but it's, I can't see how you both are going to operate with all these 40 clubs, I believe, this year for Sasquatch Days, and then you got the dragon boaters. So that's something that'll be worked out, I'm assuming, but the other thing is, the folks are going to walk from the hotel. I just want clarification, my own, to round the lagoon to get on the floats to be taken to the water park is staying where it is. I see it, right? I'm correct there, yes. So just explain how they're going to get from the hotel, get their life jackets on, and then how do they get down to the water and the floats to take them to the water park? Thank you.
So, obviously the plan is in front of you there, that we'd be doing all our life jacking and wetsuit fitting from that area. And then we would be getting them on the rafts like we are now on the beach area. And then taking to and from the park. So unloading and deloading from that one area. Right now, we are getting everyone coming down the marina, but the marina is obviously a little too small for how many people we're pushing through, and that's why we use the beach to get everyone out to the water park safely. And that's why in this plan, we're pretty much moving our existing docks and having to add some docks to make a loop so we can safely move people down, check in, get their wetsuits, get their life jackets, and then they go to an area where they can get onto the tube. When they get back, they get off that area and they can take all their stuff off and leave the exit ramp. So there's no conflict. So a nice smooth system moving through the whole marina.
Something the public to remember, this is a family operated operation. They live in our community. I've known the family for donkey's years, before this guy even was born. And it's an economic driver for our community and our accommodation, plus the restaurants and hopefully our gift shops. In all my time, I haven't seen correspondence either from the chamber or from tourism that they've had. Maybe they did, but I never heard of negative reports about the water park. Over the years, I've heard the odd comment, "Oh, the colors are not nice." I said, well, that's always something that's in the eyes of the beholder. But it employs a lot of people. It brings room nights into our village, and I personally support this. The only problem I have is the actual location with the amount of because we're going to revitalize, as you know, that whole area. We're waiting to start the work on there, and the walkway and all that area is under one of our new plans that's moving forward. So I'm concerned the amount of foot traffic that's going to hit that area from the beach that you are now. Is there any consideration being given in regards to, now I'm not a planner, and I'm just going to say this, I'm just using, say, 50 feet from the existing floatplane dock where it could be set up there. And then you're still on the same beach that you're moving your people from. Because we're only making, I mean, it's all the equipment, right? All the Sea-Doo and the huts, and that's all this that has to be moved into a location. Because to me, you're there already where you load up your floats to take them just around the other side of the marina. So if there's a possibility of some type of plan that could be done to utilize that area, I think that would be the perfect area to continue. not using the floatplane dock, but just a distance from the floatplane dock, a separate dock or whatever would be put there. I don't think it would interfere with the existing boats that are moored for renting, because there's still room for them to back out and get out into the lake. And there you wouldn't interfere with the events. So that's just a thought. So maybe you have an answer. Thank you.
I like your idea. I'm just concerned about the amount of boat traffic in that area already, and that's kind of why we decided to kind of go over there. Personally, that'd be a way better spot, because the point where we were considering the point right now, if everyone goes for a walk on the spit, you can see the sand howling off in that area, and that wouldn't be ideal. But it's something that we could discuss. But I don't really have any other comment than maybe it might be a little bit too busy with the floatplane dock and the hotel dock there, with boats having to be able to swing in the wind. But I'm not saying no to talking about it.
Economics wise, I would think that would probably be a cheaper way of you to put something in place. I mean, the week before the Sasquatch days, I thought, if you folks were already set up with where you're proposing, the sand that was blowing with the east wind, I thought, my God, they're going to get covered. Where you are now, you don't get that sand blowing as such. You know, it's a bad corner that where you're proposing at the moment. So I've spent many hours walking around there, and every day I look at that spot west of the floatplane dock, and I thought, to me, this would be, because you're just, there where you're loading the folks on with all your life jackets, and to me, it seems a better place for you overall and for the foot traffic.
Yeah, I can agree to that. The wind is nasty in Harrison, and that's why we strategically put the water park where it is as well. Like, we could have put it anywhere, but that part of Harrison is less windy. Like, there could be like 20 knot wind over by the spit, and then 5 over there. Also, we had to work within our water depths. So the beach that was dredged back in the 80s, Alan probably did that back then. We need that deeper water because the Harrison Lake's a very hard pan sand, and we need the depth to run it. So that's why we put the park there. But yes, that would be beneficial to have it in that area. We can talk further about that, but yeah, no further comment on that.
Just have one more question from councillors, and then we'll wrap it up, and then I'll direct these folks maybe the best route to go with our staff. Councillor Allen, you have to wrap this up, please.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I have 3 questions I'd like to ask. You mentioned 40,000 people coming. Is that 40,000 tickets per year, or 40,000 people, or what does that number constitute?
Yeah, so we pretty much do 90% online booking, and this year we're going to full 100% online booking, so we can actually track the user through our waiver system. So that's 40,000 people that have visited us year to year. Obviously, those numbers were a little bit higher in COVID, but we're sustained in 2023 and hoping for 2024 to kind of bring that many people to the community again.
But I can just ask a bit about zoning. Are you familiar with Harrison's zoning bylaw, land use regulations? We have those, right?
I'm not privy. I haven't read them. That's why I have a consultant to specify and read through all the bylaws in regards to that.
I'm just bringing it up because one of the principles of our zoning bylaw is that every business in Harrison must provide off-street parking for its patrons. You say in your statement that you do not provide off-street parking and have no intention of doing so. And to me, that's kind of unfair to all the other people who have to provide off-street parking for their clientele. We also have a zone there called marine commercial, and marinas such as you're proposing are supposed to be in the marine commercial zone. And this part of the lake is not zoned for that. The marine commercial zone is over there on Rockwell Drive.
Excuse me.
So that would be-
Excuse me, Mr. Allen, if I may allow you to wrap this up, and I would suggest that these folks do have a planner and people who they're working with. I'm sure they can cover those bases with our staff if it comes to regarding the parking. In my knowledge, and as long as you've lived here, anybody that's been using that beach area for whatever reason has never had to concern themselves about off-street parking. So how that relates to water parks, I don't have an answer at the moment, but that's something for them to deal with our staff at a later stage. And your last question is, please?
Well, just a point of information, Mr. Mayor, I'm quite familiar with dredging in the lagoon and the beach area. And the area in front of their proposed marina was not dredged in the 80s, it was dredged in the 60s by John Green. And it does provide the deep water that they need. My concern is that what will happen if we approve this marina at this location is that the whole water park will migrate to the east because of the low water that we're experiencing in Harrison Lake this year and in the future. And with the low water, they can't operate in less than 4 or 5 feet or something of water, and they will want to move the whole location to the beach in front of the Black Forest and the Harrison Beach Hotel. And I'm not sure that that would be a good thing for Harrison. So I see this as being the first move of 2 moves, the eventual plan being to have the water park located right in front of our premium beach. And I really don't think that's what Harrison needs or should be about. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you have a comment.
Yeah, I totally disagree. We had our drought year last year. We were running out of water on the whole lake. We were down to 3 feet of water on some areas. The water park is in the hole already. That's why we put it there. It can run. We ran right to September long weekend. No issues. The water park will not move. It can't move. It's too windy. Anything east, it will blow away in the wind.
Thank you. Councillor Vidal, you have a last question?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Facio. Through you to our presenters, thank you for taking the time. I hope you appreciate the concerns that and questions council has raised today. I do want to say that, well, one question also is, I believe you are also residents of Harrison, is that correct? Thank you.
Yeah, we are.
The water park, as commented by Councillor Jackson and Deputy Mayor Facio, is an economic drive to this community. What I would like to see is some further discussion with our staff. Deputy Mayor Facio has brought up possibly an alternate location. I'm not ready to make a decision one way or the other here today. Deputy Mayor Facio, do you need a motion then to refer back to staff to work with staff?
Yeah, I'll come to that in a minute. I'm just going to allow, if you'll finish, Councillor Jackson, the last word.
That's fine, nothing further
Thank
then,
you.
thank you.
Councillor Jackson, the last word on this.
Thank you, Worship. My only comment is that, in all likelihood, the majority of all the children that are using the water park have come here staying with their parents and they're taking hotel rooms. They don't really need off-street parking. That's the vast majority. Because I'm told quite often when I go to the hotel that there's a waiting list. There's children waiting to get their turn to go out to the water park. So, I mean, this is bringing economic development. They're not coming here in thousands of cars and looking for a place to park. They're already here. spending money, going to our hotels, going to our restaurants. We gotta look at the positive side of life, not continually looking at the negative and downside that the atomic bomb may come tomorrow. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, and it's in their report in regards to the majority of their customers are accommodation people already, whether it's a motel or bed and breakfast or the hotels, they're already parked. My last question to you is when you do get into your discussions is that have the Stahelis First Nations been consulted on this as well?
That would be our next step. Obviously, with the Sasquatch Days, we would have to have all those communications in regards to that spot and the races. On communication with them, we need to move forward, I guess, with you guys first. We're trying to get all the correspondence tidied up before it hits land officer, because we're in a time sensitive thing here. Like, if we don't get a renew, then we need to figure something out for next season, right? Like right away. That's our concern, is that we don't get a renew and we're kind of stuck and we can't offer that to the community next year.
And have you heard as of yet regarding the change from the province?
It's very, very really backed up. Back to your question there, we did get the Stahelis support for the water park 10 years ago in 2015. I'm assuming we would get their support as well due to it being such a vibrant asset to the community.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask councillors that I believe the best route here now is to refer this back with the water park people, with our staff, and then come back with a report in August at the council meeting in August to see how far this project has moved forward. Maybe by then you've heard about from the province regarding the water lot, hopefully, because they do have an election coming up soon, so good luck on that one. But as I say, I fully support the project. I hope we can move forward with this. It's an important issue for our community and for tourism, and it's we want to be supporters of our businesses in Harrison Hot Springs. So the motion is Councillor Vital, if you want to make it.
Thank you. Yes, I move that this project be referred back to staff for further research and to bring back a report to council at our August regular council meeting. Thank you.
I will call the question. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call, yes, Councillor Allen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I really believe that this requires a lot of deep thought and more discussion about the official community plan and what kind of a Harrison we're trying to build here. We have said in our OCP in the past that we want to avoid being a day trip destination. And if we're going to build a sustainable economy, we need quality tourism products that attract people who spend 2 or 3 days at a time and eat in the restaurants rather than the day trip destination. And I think that we need to think very deeply about what we're doing to the village, because a lot of the people who used to come here and enjoy the peace and quiet and serenity and were prepared to pay for that privilege are not coming anymore because it's too crowded, too noisy, and too busy. And I think that we need to be talking about the quality of our tourism product rather than the quantity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And from my personal perspective, I believe we have quality and a quiet setting out there. And again, I wish you all the best in moving forward. So I'll call the question of moving this to our consultation with our staff All in favor? Opposed? Opposed by Councillor Allen, motion passes. Thank you for your presentation. Order of business, please.
The next order of business is a discussion on Surf Lake.
Do we have folks here from this? We don't. Yes, the
this
corporate
was-
officer, you have comments?
Thank you. This was referred to a committee of the whole for further discussion from a regular council meeting, where there was some correspondence attached from two different individuals regarding the possibility of a surf lake.
Excuse me. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, your worship. That was in at an open council meeting. It's not in their package today. It was just referred to for discussion to this Cal.
Any representatives being here to discuss this or without any correspondence in front of us, we'll have to table this to another time. So we'll table this,
Mr. Mayor, could I know where those people invited? Are they aware we're
I'll just
discussing their
check
project?
check with the corporate officer. Thank you.
My understanding is that it was just referred to a committee of the whole, but it wasn't clear whether someone was to be invited to present. If that's what council would like to have someone present, or if council would like to refer it to staff to present a report with some just preliminary information, that's completely possible.
I suggest with the shortage of meetings in the next 3 months, that maybe staff can deal with this and come back with a report at a later date. Thank you. And the next order of business, please.
Excuse me, your worship, can we get a motion of council to refer the Surf Lake issue back to staff to bring a report forward and
Moved by Councillor Jackson. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. Thanks. Okay, who's next?
Moving on to the dike project update, and I believe we have representatives here from NHC to present.
Gentlemen, please come forward.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for having us here today. We are here to provide an update on the waterfront flood mitigation project, to discuss some of the engagement that's been carried out and to discuss next steps. So just a little bit about us. The project team of consultants working on this. You have Northwest Hydraulic Consultants, who is the prime consultant, and we are hydrotechnical and civil engineers. We have Space to Place, who is handling landscape architecture and public engagement activities. Thurber Engineering is the geotechnical engineering consultant, and Legacy Environmental is taking care of permitting and environmental issues and Indigenous consultation. So presenters today, my name is Dan Maldoff. I'm a hydrotechnical engineer at NHC. I'm joined by Dale Muir, who is one of our NHC principals, an engineer, and Jeff Cutler, a principal from Space to Place, landscape architect. So our outline for today, first we'll give an overview of the project, then run through some of the concepts for dike design and some of the options that have been developed so far. Then a summary of public engagement, some background on project rationale and the approach that is being taken for the design, and then recommendations for next steps. And we do have a few slides to get through today, so we ask that we please handle any questions just after having gotten through the slides. So just to talk about some of the issues that we're dealing with this project. The project includes both the dike, which is from Rendall Park to Miami River Pump Station, and then also the road to the wastewater treatment plant, which is not considered a dike, but is a critical piece of infrastructure along the waterfront. So the wastewater treatment plant road would be inundated during a large flood, impeding access, and there's active erosion along it with some of the erosion protection that is not up to standard. And then the main issue that we are looking at with the dike is the potential for overtopping of the current dike during a large flood. So just a little bit of background about the project. Currently, the project is funded by a $6 million UBCM grant. And as I mentioned, the components include the road and shoreline to the wastewater treatment plant, as well as the dike along the waterfront. And for the purposes of referring to sections of it, we have divided it into 6 zones. Zone 1 is the shoreline around the treatment plant. Zone 2 is the wastewater treatment plant road. Zone 3 is the section in front of the Hot Springs Resort. Zone 4 is the main commercial waterfront west of the plaza. Zone 5 is the section that faces onto Lagoon, and Zone 6 is Rendall Park. So in terms of concepts, the wastewater treatment plant road and shoreline, currently the road is formed of an earth embankment protected by riprap along the shoreline. Much of the riprap has been either impacted by erosion or has rock armor that is too small for conditions along the lake. And the image up there is an example of a location where some of the riprap would have been plucked from the shoreline. The concept here would be to generally maintain a similar geometry to the current road, but raise it up to an elevation that would be passable during a large flood, allowing staff to access this critical piece of infrastructure, and also to improve the armoring along the shoreline so that the road is there after a flood and doesn't get washed out by the lake and waves. And then dike upgrades. So several deficiencies were found during the 2015 Lower Mainland Dike Assessment. The main one that we are looking to address with this project is the crest elevation, which is below current design standards. And for the main commercial waterfront, we have developed 3 concepts to be considered, and are hoping to move forward one based on input from council and the public, as well as project considerations. And some of the criteria that we are looking at as we carry out the design, we're looking at setting an appropriate crest level, maintaining beach and shoreline access, accessibility consideration of public areas, considering waterfront views, impacts in terms of tree removal, cost, and also operations and maintenance by the village. And those are listed in no particular order. So now moving on to the 3 concepts that have been developed, or actually starting here with the east and west ends of the dike, where in these locations, the dike currently runs through grassy areas. You have the location in front of Hot Springs Resort at Zone 3, and Zone 6 is through Rendall Park at the east end of the dike. The concept being considered here is an earth-fill dike similar to what's currently there, but higher. And to walk us through the rest of the concepts and anything else I should mention, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff Cutler from Space to Place.
Okay, thank you very much. So during, in the middle commercial area, between zones 4 and 5, we've developed 3 different scenarios to test out the options and see how they might look like when they're implemented. So we took a typical section at the amphitheater there. It also has the accessible ramp up to the path. So this option here keeps the wall along the parking area to the on the village side of the dike, and then this is the earth-filled dike for this section. It does introduce some accessibility challenges, so we have to have an additional ramp up to the top of the path, and also the entire area between the lock block wall and the existing rock wall would have to be modified in this area. So there's quite a big area of restoration that would be required in this. Another thing to consider with this as well is that it would like remove the level lawn areas where people use for picnicking, and also it would require the removal of all of the trees through that section as well. The second option that we looked at is the option that has the least disturbance of the existing site. And so what what's being explored on this option is a sheet pile wall that would serve as a flood protection. So that would be on the water side of the existing pathway. And then so that way the existing stone wall along the parking would remain in place, and all of that, the ramps up to that. We would have deployable walls, so that you can see that white section in the wall there. Those are essentially planks that could be put in place when there's a flood event anticipated, but for most of the time that would remain open. So you really keep some of the same movements that you do now. Obviously, where there's the wall, you wouldn't be able to access the lawn area, but it also does keep the majority of the trees through this section and maintains those level lawn areas. And then the third option we looked at, because recognizing that with the parking, that for people to access these ramps and steps up to get to the beach area, that they have to walk along the street because there's no sidewalk there. What this option explores is removing that rock wall along that's existing there and replacing it with a stepped wall. So a lower wall, which doesn't have to be structural, and then your secondary wall, which is beside the path, which would be your structural wall. That would be likely a sheet pile wall as well, but it does provide the opportunity for a planter in between those two walls, as well as we're able to have a sidewalk in front of the cars there, so that you take the people off of the street and onto the sidewalk, improving the safety for that as well. And as well, this doesn't change the grading on the water side of the pathway there, so it maintains those level lawn areas. So this doesn't have as much disturbance as the first option, but it does have more disturbance from the second option. This option would be more costly than the second option, but there is some public benefits that would also be seen with this. and then I'll pass it back to Dan.
So this is a follow-up question that we received following the public engagement, just about whether we could consider locating the dike on the outside of the lagoon berm. So some benefits of doing that, it moves it away from the main public space, could be less visually obstructive, reduces conflict with some of the landscaping features that are currently there. But this alignment has considerable, I guess, technical and cost challenges. The existing lagoon berm is actually about a meter or so lower than the current dike. So it would need to be raised about twice as much as following the current dike alignment and raising that. It adds about 200 meters to the total length of the dike. So there's some costs there, and it's also directly along the shoreline, so there would be a need for erosion protection versus having a dike that is set back from the shoreline along the current alignment. This could turn out to be a fairly complex project in terms of actually maintaining the function of the lagoon. The lagoon currently fills and drains as the lake levels change. So we're asking a dike to be an impervious structure that provides flood protection. And there would need to be some design done there to ensure that the lagoon continues to function as a lagoon. And also from a permitting standpoint, there would be some in-stream footprint, which adds some complexity there. And then also there are some unknowns in terms of construction quality, the permeability of the embankment and its current stability. And then for the temporary flood protection, one concept that's being considered is these stop logs here at access points to the waterfront. You would have essentially gaps in the dike or flood wall with slots where these boards could be slotted in without any need for special equipment. Could be done by hand. And one of the key considerations for deployable flood protection like this is just having enough staff resources to be able to deploy them before a large flood. So this solution here is relatively manageable from that standpoint. And the photos that are up there are from an application of that at a sheet pile dike that was constructed in Calgary. But in terms of cost per meter, these deployable sections are about 2 to 3 times the cost of a permanent dike. So that does mean that they need to be used somewhat judiciously. And then public engagement summary, I'll hand it back to Jeff.
Yeah, so for the public engagement, this was in December of last year. We had an open house in this room in one of the evenings. And we also had an online survey that was active for about a month. Some of the things that we heard was there was definitely a concern about the visual impact of the dike upgrade on the views of Harrison Lake, especially from the commercial area, which we absolutely anticipated. There was an interest in having more deployable sections to minimize that visible impact, interest in preserving green space and mature trees along the waterfront, interest in learning more about the modeling and flood scenarios, which Dan has gone through in a bit more detail today. Desire to maintain and enhance the accessibility of the waterfront. So making sure that it's easily available to people of all abilities, and interest in improving waterfront aesthetics, integrating art, lighting, planting, and or seating into the flood protection.
So now just moving on to some of the technical considerations for the design and the rationale for the project from a flood protection standpoint. We're dealing with three main hazards along Harrison Lake. The first is flood hazard during the Fraser River freshet, which occurs during the snowmelt period in spring and early summer. And historically, the highest lake levels have occurred when the Fraser River is high. At that point, the Fraser River backwaters the Harrison River, which results in lake levels being elevated. And at this point, it tends to be nicer weather, so that coincides with somewhat smaller waves than what you would see during fall and winter storms. And then another scenario that could occur is inundation from the south through District of Kent and Agassiz, which could occur if the dikes in District of Kent were to fail or be overtopped. The second hazard to be considered is lake inflow flooding during a large precipitation event in fall or winter. That can result in higher lake levels coinciding with large wind and waves, which could overtop the dike. And then the third hazard is landslide generated waves. There's been identified potential for a slope failure up the lake at Mount Breckenridge and some other slopes, which could result in a very large wave propagating to the village and running up as much as 20 to 25 meters. And that, of course, is beyond what is feasible to design a dike for. So some flood history. The largest flood on record is the Fraser River 1894 flood. During that scenario, that has been recreated with hydraulic models, and the estimated water level at the village of Harrison Hot Springs during that event would be 14.1 meters. And currently, that 1894 flood of record is the design standard for flood protection infrastructure along the Fraser River system. Another large flood was the 1948 flood, and we have an image here, a photo of inundation along the village waterfront. This was, I believe, roughly a 200-year flood. Brought Harrison Lake up to a water level of 13.5 meters, and the current dike along the waterfront was constructed shortly after that flood and has a crest elevation of 13.9 meters. So, and then this is looking at some of the historical lake levels. The blue dots are lake levels that occurred during Fraser River freshet during spring snowmelt. The brown dots are winter lake levels. And what this shows is just that the highest lake levels each year do occur during that spring snowmelt period. That typically is what governs the annual maximum lake levels. You do have a few instances where fall or winter storms resulted in fairly high lake levels that approach what's typically seen during freshet. One example being the November 2021 atmospheric river. And those fall lake levels are combined with larger waves than what you would see in the spring and early summer. And then also shown on this is the level of the current dike, which is the red line, which was constructed after 1948. And then the green dashed line is the recreated 1894 Fraser River flood level. And then just a small bit about that, the landslide generated wave hazard. There is evidence of similar activity in the region. At Chehalis Lake in 2007, there was a large landslide and the wave run-up was estimated at about 30 meters. You can see it by that removed vegetation along the shoreline in that after Google Earth image. And then some background about the flood scenarios that have been shown in floodplain mapping. So this is a recreation of that Fraser River 1894 flood, assuming that the dikes are able to be overtopped without failing. And under this scenario, this shows that although you have high lake levels along the Fraser to the south in District of Kent, the dike along the waterfront overtops first before those dikes in District of Kent. And under that overtopping, essentially all habitable areas in the village, which is shown by that polygon, would be inundated. The inundation is contained by the valley walls and extend all the way to, I believe that is the highway and Gulf Road to the south, which form an embankment. And then this is looking at the scenario if a dike in Kent were to breach or be overtopped, and at that point you would have a flow path from the south, which runs north through the village into Harrison Lake. The inundation extents in the village would be similar under this scenario with somewhat higher water levels. So the village does rely on those dikes in District of Kent for flood protection, but that dike along the village waterfront is an important piece of flood protection infrastructure during a large Fraser River flood. And this is some background about provincial standards for setting dike crest elevation. So the starting point is to identify a flood level, which is typically based on either the 200-year flood or the flood of record if larger than 200 years, which is why in the case of the Fraser River, the 1894 flood is used for setting design levels. And then added to that, for a dike, we would consider settlement, which is lowering of the dike over time, an allowance for climate change, which would be higher lake levels under future conditions, an allowance for wave run-up, and then also freeboard, which is an allowance for uncertainty in the analysis and local fluctuations in water levels. So considering the three hazards that I discussed, for hazard 1, using this criteria, the water level would be set based on that 1894 flood of record, and considering coincident wind and waves, which would be in late spring, early summer. For hazard 2, which is a rainfall-driven elevated lake level occurring in fall or winter, it would be a 200-year fall or winter lake level combined with waves occurring at that time of year. And then for the landslide generated waves, that would be considering a very large wave propagating up the lake, which is beyond what is feasible to be managed with a dike. The approach for dealing with wave run up. So wave run up, just to define that, as waves move along the lake, they impact the shoreline and they essentially run up the slope to a maximum elevation, and that maximum elevation is the wave run up. So the preferred approach, according to provincial standards, is to design your crest height based on the designated flood level, which is the still water level, plus that full amount of wave run up, and then adding freeboard on top of that. But it is acknowledged in the provincial guideline that using this approach may be infeasible and may result in very high and costly dikes. So they provide an alternate approach, which they refer to as acceptable crest height, which is an acceptance that there will be some wave overtopping and having a strategy for managing the water that overtops by waves on the landslide. And that could be drainage or pumping or other. And then this is just an animation from our wave run up model, just so you can see just what this looks like with waves moving along the lake and impacting a flood wall along the waterfront. This model doesn't continue to propagate past the flood wall, but you can see under this simulation, the peak of some of the waves is slightly above the top of that wall. So this would be an example of that acceptable overtopping approach. So now to put some numbers to this. So the existing dike crest elevation is at 13.9 meters. That 1894 flood level is at 14.1 meters. And then the climate change allowance, there are some updated estimates of climate change flows along the Fraser River, which we are working with. The hydraulics associated with those Fraser River flows are currently being analyzed, and we will see results for those in the coming months, I believe. But preliminary estimates for a climate change allowance based on available information could be anywhere from 0.4 meters to 1.7 meters above current lake levels. And then for wave run up, ideally you would set a crest elevation to avoid all wave overtopping, but just as a reasonable approach and based on some of the considerations, we believe it's appropriate to use this acceptable overtopping approach and understand that there will be some wave overtopping during a large flood and have a plan for managing that. And then we have the 0.6 meters freeboard, which is the typical freeboard that is applied to structures such as this. So based on adding all of these numbers, that gives a crest level anywhere from 15.1 meters to 17 meters. And yeah, that 15.1 meter would be kind of a minimum estimate. It may end up being somewhere closer to 15.5 meters based on these updated climate change projections. But this just gives an idea of some of the potential elevations. So relative to the existing dike, that would be a raise of, say, 1.2 to 1.5 meters. And then this is just a bit of background just about considering these return periods, which sound like these very improbable events for large floods, but just understanding that these return periods, say the 100-year or 500-year flood, are assigned really based on probability math, kind of based on the average interval between a flood of that size occurring. But when you consider such a flood occurring over the design life of something around a dike, something like a 100-year or a 500-year flood is not actually that improbable an event. So the existing dike, which would be built around approximately a 100-year flood design standard, within a 30-year period, there's a 26% chance of seeing such a flood. And over a 75-year period, that goes up to 53%. And then for the proposed dike upgrades, which would be designed around the current design standards for dikes, if we consider a 500-year flood, over 30 years, there's a 6% chance of seeing a flood like that. And that goes up to 14% over 75 years. So it's a substantial reduction in the probability of a flood that would overtop the dike, but still something that could reasonably happen. So now just moving on to recommendations for next steps. At this point, we have done some of the background research. We have undertaken some public consultation and engagement, initial discussions with Stahelis First Nation, collecting some of the constraints, and we have developed some conceptual options. The next step would be to move that to 30% design, which would be to take a preferred option and flush out some of the details and location-specific considerations along the waterfront. Essentially, take the preferred concept and fit it to the waterfront and produce a preliminary drawing set. So our recommendation would be to proceed with such a 30% design. And the approach that we're recommending is a design crest level based on the 1894 Fraser River flood, with an allowance for freeboard, acceptable wave overtopping, and future conditions, which include climate change. Also included in the design would be road and shoreline upgrades, which would improve access during a flood and resiliency of the road following a flood. And then in terms of design concepts, in front of Hot Springs Resort and through Rendell Park, we would recommend proceeding with a concept based on an earth-fill dike similar to what's currently there, but higher. And then for the main commercial waterfront, our recommendation would be to consider the two flood wall concepts, which are concepts 2 and 3. Really just based on their footprint compared to the earth-fill dike concept there, and reduce disturbance compared to an earth embankment along the waterfront. These concepts would meet flood protection requirements, would have a lower impact to existing landscape and trees. And concept 3, which would include replacement of the existing rock wall along the street, has the added benefit of a new sidewalk and updated landscaping. And then also we would be looking to include additional deployable sections along the dike to provide view and access windows. And these would be sections that would be closed off with flood barriers prior to a large flood. And application of these closure sections would need to consider flood protection performance, cost, operational intensiveness, and just considerations around site layout. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for the presentation. I'll start with councillor Vidal, work our way around, and we'll keep it to the 5-minute question time as our procedure by law, and come round again a second time if you wish. Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Facio, through you to our presenters. First of all, you mentioned the 1948 flood. My family has a long history in the Mission Valley, and I have heard all of the stories about the serious effect that flood had in the Fraser Valley. So the existing dike that is now along the beachfront, during preliminary discussions of raising up the dike, there seemed to be a level of concern or unknown as to what that dike is actually constructed from, especially internally. Would that be something in your investigation? And the reason is I hate to see the money being spent to raise up the dike and have a failure of the existing dike. Thank you.
For sure. Actually, last fall, our team did carry out geotechnical investigations along the waterfront just to identify the subsurface conditions. And Thurber, the geotechnical consultant on our team, would be working with us to come up with a design that works with the current subsurface conditions. And one advantage to that sheet pile wall design is that it does provide an impervious barrier below the existing grade as well. But it's definitely an aspect that will be considered in the design.
Thank you. I have a question on the access to the wastewater treatment plant. What is the plan to build up the shoreline there? And the reason I ask is at low lake levels in the spring, quite often you will have people removing rocks and forming hot pools, because there are hot pools that bubble up from the lake when it's that low. So what could be done to protect that happening again? Thank you.
Yeah, so the concept that we have been working with so far is something similar to what's currently there, but with appropriately sized rock. Really, I think the main thing that you could do is just make sure that the rocks are big enough that they're hard to move. It is a bit of a challenge preventing people from modifying the structure. Short of taking a completely alternative approach like a concrete wall or something like that. But that's not really what's being considered at this point.
Thank you. I'm just amazed at some of the size of the rocks that have been removed.
When there's a will, there's a way.
You also talked about ensuring accessibility in the new dike upgrade. Would that be incorporating the existing ramps, or would that include other ramps? The reason I ask is I think that we could do with a few more accessibility ramps up to the beachfront. So your comments on that, please.
Jeff can comment on that.
Sure. So I think depending on which option, like if we're going with option number 2, that's essentially not really doing much at all to modify the existing rock wall and stairs and everything that get up to the pathway. So that would be keeping the existing accessibility as is. With the option number 2, where we're rebuilding that, we probably would have some more options. I think one of the challenges is like the options where there are ramps, like they do take up a number of parking spots. And so to add more ramps, we're also taking out more parking. And I know that's probably a sensitive issue as well. So there are trade-offs, but I think that that is something that in option 3 would, I get, like, we could also look at doing it in sections of option 2 as well, if that was desired to, we would just have to rebuild sections of that wall to improve the accessibility. And then option number 1 with the earth-filled dike, because you're having to go up that much higher, you're not going through the wall, you're going up and over. That just adds to the accessibility challenge, I think. So that's why we didn't recommend that option.
Thank you. And just not so much a question, but a comment. I know there were some concerns raised by residents and businesses that raising the dike would impede the view of especially restaurants, patrons. I quite often walk along Esplanade and enjoy a cup of coffee at the numerous restaurants. And those restaurants that do have patio level, road level, patio level, what I can see is that there is already an existing blocking of the view of the lake. So while I appreciate residents and business concerns, I think that it is much more important that we look at flood mitigation, as long as there is still that access for residents to get up on the beachfront. So thank you. Nothing further right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vital. Councillor Jackson.
No comment at this time, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Allen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'm following this with great interest. It would be much easier for me to do so if I had the printouts of your presentation. Are those available? Did you bring copies for us by any chance?
We did not bring copies.
Okay, well, I would like to have a copy of what you presented on the slides, because this is an ongoing discussion and we're dealing with facts and figures, and I can't keep all of that in my head. I need to have a hard copy to refer to. But from memory, one of the first points I'd like to make is that if you wanted to know what the current dike was built of, how it was built and who built it, you didn't need to go and get a geotechnical engineer to guess at it. You could have asked me. I can tell you how it was built. I can tell you who built it, and I can tell you what material went into it. So why would you ignore local knowledge on such a fundamental piece of data that is critical to your design? I mean, there's no secret about that. It was done publicly with public money. It's recorded in the minutes. Some of the people involved are still probably around. We can tell you exactly how the dike was built. I can also tell you that after it was built, it started to erode because of wave action. And if you wanted to know about the wave pattern, again, ask the local people. Don't be guessing at it. We can tell you what the wave pattern is on Harrison Lake from time to time during the year. When the erosion of the 1948 dike was taking place, our local visionary, John Green, came up with the plan to protect that dike. And he did so by building a dredge and dredging up sand from the base of Harrison Lake and pumping it up against the dike, creating a slope that was a maximum grade of, I think, 20-1 or 5%. And that slope very effectively protected the dike, because any wave that was coming ashore had a wave run-up area and dissipated before it got to the material on top. And that worked really well for many years. Now, somebody later on decided to dump a bunch of rock all over it, which changed the whole dynamic of the beach. So we know this stuff. We can tell you, if you ask the right people what the beach is made of and how it was built, we can tell you that. You don't have to guess. Anyway, the other thing that wasn't considered in your designs, maybe it was considered, but it didn't appear in any of the considerations, was the use of lock blocks as temporary flood barriers. They are very effective, they're very economical, they're very easy to handle, and they are very available because they're all over the Fraser Valley at concrete plants with the leftover concrete goes into the lock blocks. There are thousands of them around, and we can get them anytime. We have equipment that can handle them very quickly and effectively, but they don't appear on any of your suggestions for using them to block those areas of public access when a flood occurs. And I think that the lock blocks, having seen them deployed in other flood areas, are a really useful piece of equipment. Cheap, economical, easy to handle, low tech, and they really work. Nothing fancy about them. The second thing that I don't see considered here is, since you're concerned about wave run-up, the waves in Harrison Lake, the biggest waves we get in Harrison Lake and the most destructive waves we get in Harrison Lake happen in wintertime. And not just any time in wintertime, they happen when we have a northern outflow coming down Harrison Lake. And with a fetch of about 60 kilometers, with a lake that's about 1,000 feet deep at the north end, those waves arrive at the village having built up over that period and over that distance. And those are the only waves that cause serious erosion. They don't actually cause much in the way of erosion on the road to the sewer treatment plant, because the sewer treatment plant itself is a promontory that sticks out from the shore and protects that shoreline. When the waves arrive at Harrison Lake, they don't arrive straight from the north. They arrive from the northwest, and they come across and they sweep across the village in that direction. And that's how the waves behave. I'm telling you that because I've watched them for 40 years and dealt with them for 40 years. So it's not just the size of the waves and the timing of the waves, but the direction of the waves that needs to be considered. In other areas with which I am familiar, they protect the shoreline from wave run-up with two different mechanisms. The older mechanism, which is falling out of favor today, was the use of groins. Groins being wood or rock structure that is built on the beach, going perpendicular to the shoreline and out into the water. And when you have waves, as we do, that are coming.
Councillor Allen, will I interrupt you just have 1 minute? Thank you.
Sorry, what was that?
I interrupt you, just have 1 minute, please. We're going by our procedure bylaw, 5 minutes to speak. Thank you. Now, starting on that, per our procedure bylaw, council will have 5 minutes for discussion and we'll come back again.
Mr. Mayor,
So
this
can you
is,
get to any points that would be relevant to the actual proposal? Instead of so much of the history, which I'm sure these gentlemen have already researched. Thank you.
well, they haven't spoken to me about it, and this is my only opportunity I've had to speak to them about it, and I intend to take it. This is not a discussion of a resolution. This is a question and answer period where we're sharing information. So you're going to cut me off? Anyway, you don't have to just protect the dike. You can protect the dike by intercepting the waves before they get to the dike. The groins that I described can be built of timber, they can be made of rock, and they effectively break up the waves before they get destructive at the dike. the more recent way to do that is the creation of offshore islets. And instead of the obstruction being perpendicular to the beach, the obstruction becomes parallel to the beach, but about 100 to 150 meters offshore. And in that case, these islets, which have openings every maybe 100 meters, 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 meters, they intercept the incoming waves, break them up, and they still allow water to circulate in the back, still allow the beach to fill up. And they are used all over the world in beaches like ours to protect the beach and to protect the foreshore. And they also help build the beach because material being carried by the waves ends up building up inside and behind them.
Thank you, Councillor
So-
Allen.
So I think that you should consider more options rather than just another 2 meters on top of the dike. I think there are other ways to do this and better ways to do this. Now I'm being cut off. I object to that.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. First, thank you for your presentation. And this is one man's opinion. If there's anybody in this room, I think, who has a tremendous amount of experience about the lake, he is sitting here in the audience. The village, sorry, sir, the village acquired your services for engineering, statistics, wave action, soil composition, and how best to protect the village. This is why these things are done. There was an open house where the public were allowed to come forward and give their present opinions, ask questions, whatever Councillor Allen is talking about. He had an opportunity there to ask the questions. Probably he did come and did ask questions. I'm not sure. But the road to the wastewater treatment plant a few years ago, we had to replace the bridge because it was flooded. It was too low. Also, the road is eroding, and that has to be redone as well. So we do get erosion. You can see the erosion in the sand when we just have a heavy rain. Forget about wave action. Now, from my perspective, and I have to consider the sight lines for all concerned, is you've been given a task, great presentation, great designs, but I was wondering, I mean, this is more came from Councillor Jackson than myself in a conversation, that where the existing lock blocks are at the moment, we could raise them by one more block. It's a continuous line all the way to the or virtually where the last part of the beach is through the hotel front entrance. And then other areas, we could either do the same with Randall Park. And of course, we do have, which we bought for a good reason many years ago, the aquadams that we have in store, which is a second backup as well that could go on the beach, on the walkway along the promenade. I don't know if that ever came to you through the open houses as a question, but I'm just going to ask you, did that idea come forward at all? Thank you.
Yeah, we are aware of the aqua dams. What we understand, they are quite onerous to deploy. And I guess that is one of the main reasons that we understand the village is looking to move away from their use if possible. In terms of the lock block wall, we would have to consider the elevations of what's currently there. Just to confirm, you are discussing the lock block walls that are kind of directly along the beach currently. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, it is an option that we could look at. We would need to ensure that they do provide the required level of flood protection even once raising it up, and there may be a need to backfill behind them. I'm not sure that you could do a freestanding lock block wall. But it is something that we could look at further.
Um, Just one further comment. As much as I appreciate Councillor Allen's historical perspective, when it comes time for grant applications to either the provincial or the federal government, it is a requirement for professional engineering assessments and reports. So I want council to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Your Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Worship. The only thing I can think of, every time I've gone to Holland on World War II battlefield tours, I walk the dikes. They're built to keep out the sea. But if you're below the dike living in the small villages, you can't see the water. However, the people behind the dikes know that they're safe because they've been really, really well built. And I think if we have to increase the wall, when you're walking along the promenade, you'll be able to see Harrison Lake really, really well. And it will give a measure of preventative that could happen in the future. Too often, we've waited for these disasters to happen. We saw it in Abbotsford. Nobody expected it. And they're having a very difficult time right now getting the attention of the federal government to get funding to get it completed. So this is something that we have to look at very seriously and get on with it before something happens and we're going to be looking back at it. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Allen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, to continue my thought about wave run-up protection. We don't actually need wave run-up protection between the plaza and the boat launch, blocks 2, 3, and 4. We don't need it because we already have offshore protection. The outer walkway of the lagoon will very effectively intercept and dissipate any waves coming down the lake at that point. So we already have offshore protection for most of our waterfront, and we don't need the wave run-up for this prime portion from the plaza right to the boat launch, because the outer walkway of the lagoon serves as almost a primary dike that protects our dike. Maybe it has to be strengthened, raised a little bit. It should at least be consistently level instead of having dips in it. And all of the trees that are on it should be gone, which is a weakening of the dike. And if you do that, then a big part of our waterfront, not lot 1 or block 1, unfortunately, doesn't need to have the extra height for wave run-up. You can do that even if you put on top of the dike walkway at the outside of the lagoon, not even a constant or a continuous wave breaking wall, but even sections of wall would be enough to dissipate those waves, which will wash out through the lagoon before they get across to the esplanade. So I really think that there's a lot more work to be done in trying to do what you intend to do with minimum impact on the village itself. The lock blocks that I mentioned could be placed on the existing pathway above the rock wall dike at the north side of the esplanade, simply by building a wide concrete sidewalk with a curb at the south side, 6, 8, 10 inches, whatever, sliding the blocks against that as the keeper, and then just building that wall as necessary. And it wouldn't take us long to build that wall if we needed to do so. And the lock blocks can be stored at the east end of the village in a convenient location, loaded on flatbeds, brought out to the dike, placed with excavators or even our own backhoe. So there are ways to do that without making it a permanent blockage to the view of the lake and what I would consider to be the destruction of the commercial value of the waterfront in Harrison, and a big disappointment to all the people who have enjoyed it for all these years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. So I'll just wrap it up with thanks again for your presentation. You've had some input from the council, and I'm assuming you'll be sitting down with our staff to go over these ideas and see what we can come up with for another presentation at a later date. I'll leave that in the hands of the staff. So again, thank you, much appreciated, and that's it.
Pardon me, your worship, if I may, if with council's blessing, I would like to, because we're starting to come up against the gun here for timing. It seems to me the focus is generally in front of the commercial sector. So section 4 and 5 are the real critical
Yes,
sections that we want to focus on. So what I was hoping we could get is the blessing from council to work with sections 1, 2, 3, and 6, with the earth bill being the section 1 being around the wastewater treatment plant, the section 2 being the road, section 3 in front of the hotel, and section 6 in Rendell Park, to work with that as move forward with the design for the earth field, and then raising of the road. And then we can really focus in on the section 3 and 4, or sorry, 4 and 5, that's in front of the commercial sector, come back with a couple of different options like council had mentioned.
now the commercial would be 1, 2, and 3.
The commercial section is, so
From the
if you
hotel-
look, at the sections that were in the drawing here that they're showing here, we have section, or sorry, zone, that's my apology. Zone 1, 2, and 3 is what we'd like to, and 6 is what we'd like to.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon, I'm
Yeah.
counting the other way around, sorry.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, 4 and 5, 5 being the main component of the commercial sector, and obviously zone 4 as well.
yeah.
And if we come back with more different options for wall design and or deployable options for that section.
Well, like I said, I'll leave it in the hands of the designers and yourselves to come back to council and work on those separate blocks that you've mentioned.
The section 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Is that fall in line with council? Okay, yes, Councillor Allen.
Well, Mr. Mayor, since the CEO has brought up zone 6, I would like to just put one more thing in front of the engineers for consideration. We have 2 development proposals in zone 6 at Rendell Park. They're both for large condominium buildings, and they will require the flood construction level to be considerably above the current ground level at Rendell Park. They will have a solid concrete wall hiding their parking garage, which will be probably 8 to 10 feet high. With those 2 projects, we have about 40% of that block protected by those walls. My suggestion has been that you engineers who are dealing with flood protection should work with the engineers for the architects and engineers on the buildings. And if you can simply ensure that those walls are built thick enough and strong enough, as they well might be already, to provide flood protection, we've got a good start on doing flood protection in zone 6 without having to do landfill or sheet pile or anything else, because the front walls of those buildings could themselves be our flood protection. There will be other areas that need to be filled in and dealt with, but a good part of that could already be handled by the planned construction, saving us all a lot of money and time, and the other fill-in areas can follow later. So I'm suggesting that there's an opportunity that we already achieve flood protection in zone 6 for about 40% of that zone, just by ensuring that those walls that form the foundation and the parking lots of those buildings are built to whatever your flood standards are. And I can't imagine that they would need much more than what they already have for structural levels. Thank you. Would you consider that suggestion?
If I recall, that question was asked to us by village staff. a few months ago, that question was passed along to us. We did look into that. And our understanding is that such a design would be unlikely to be approved by the province. There is a requirement for right-of-way for an official public dike, and it would not achieve that requirement having the dike on private property. And while potentially feasible, there are some challenges around integration with the rest of the dike and also with the timing of how those lots are built out. Essentially, until the entire dike is completed, it's the lowest spot in the dike that governs the flood protection. And if it takes, say 20 to 50 years for those lots to be developed, you have that lower level of protection during that time.
Or you misunderstand me.
are-
They're under development at the moment.
Yeah.
The development permits are being approved. It's currently happening. It's not future dreaming.
Mr. Allen, I'll leave that to our staff and the engineers if they wish to discuss that further. Do you need any motion for this at all? Nothing, we just only been referred back to staff. Again, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Now, would you like a 10-minute break, councillors? Yes, okay, we'll have a 10-minute break, thanks. Carry on, Joyce.
Get the slideshow up. Thank you. Today, I would like to provide an update on options for constructing a new village office, along with discussions on creating a master plan for the village-owned land. So currently, we're just getting the slideshow up, but this slideshow is to provide council with an overview of potential options and concepts, so direction can be given to staff on how to proceed with formalizing a path forward. If you refer to your package, on the first slide, the highlights of this presentation, here we go. The highlights of this presentation will outline preliminary investigations showing the background research staff have completed so far, strategic priorities that council has identified and the opportunities to accomplish these priority items, development master plan, which would provide a long-term strategic direction of the land around the village office and would create a framework for growth and development, funding opportunities showing current grant opportunities and options to fund a new building, and discussion where council can provide direction to staff on how to move forward in planning. In 2023, council highlighted the village's strategic priorities, which include organizational development, sustainable development, and a healthy, livable community. Under these three categories, priority actions were outlined. These include conducting a village facilities review and set priorities for a village office and other facilities, update master plans, pursue attainable and affordable housing, investigate lead development, seniors housing and resource center, and investigate a recreational facility. So to accomplish these priority actions, a review of village-owned land would be recommended so conceptual land use planning could be completed to better understand the opportunities and options available. So through consultation, a development master plan would be able to create and define the options for village-owned assets and residential, commercial, development, or even recreational programming. This would be accomplished through engagement with the public, council, as well as stakeholders. The master plan would also be able to highlight funding opportunities and to support the proposed amenities. This image highlighted here shows the village-owned land and its current usage. So currently there's a visitor center that has an attractive new building that just opened. There's an underutilized overflow parking area, a village office that is in need of replacement, and a public works yard that is also an aging asset. Long-term phasing should be established for this land to highlight what can be done in the existing assets and plan for future development through this with an overall master plan. Now shifting focus from talking about a site master plan to specifically a village office, staff investigated high-level costs to build a new building. A prior design created in 2019 that's shown here has a 2-level floor plan that would cost in the range of $5 to $6 million based on current construction costs. Staff also investigated a reduced building design that would eliminate the red highlighted areas on the first and second floor for a smaller building. This reduced size would cost in the range of 3.5 to 4.5 million. In order to fund this building, staff looked through multiple sources, but there were minimal funding streams that support a municipal office. There is, however, the Green Municipal Fund that provides loan and grant opportunities to support the planning and construction of municipal and community buildings. First option is a grant of up to 50% of eligible costs, up to a maximum of $200,000 to support the planning phase. The second is a combined grant and loan for up to 80% of eligible costs and the grant up to 15% of the total loan amount to support the construction costs. Another option staff investigated that would work towards council's strategic priorities of pursuing attainable and affordable housing is creating a village office with rental housing above through a program called BC Builds. Through information provided by BC Builds, program's vision is to assist with funding creative opportunities to add housing on existing sites and to incorporate housing above new community infrastructure. BC Builds can help secure a development partner and a building owner operator. Grants of up to $225,000 per unit to lower construction costs are available for buildings to be owned and operated by nonprofits and First Nation development companies. The BC Builds development model is to bring together landowners and residential developers to speed up project development timelines. The goal of BC Builds is to move projects from concept to construction in 12 to 18 months, rather than the typical 3 to 5 years. A key component of the initiative is to leverage underutilized public lands to create a more viable rental projects, along with grant money to keep rents more affordable and get projects off the ground. So this image here is from the city of Rossland. The city of Rossland is a great example of a community that needed a new city hall along with residential rental units. The city partnered with the Lower Columbia Affordable Housing Society to develop a mixed-use building with office space and council chambers on the first floor, and then rental units above that. So the city of Rossland owns the entire building and leases the rental housing, with the rental revenue being collected by the Housing Society and used to cover operating expenses and its portion of the shared costs. In the long term, the rent will cover property tax payments to the city, which will partly offset the costs of the city hall. So staff are seeking direction from council on how to proceed in the next steps of planning process and look forward to further discussions and any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And now we'll go around the table for discussion. We'll start with Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Worship. It's actually quite exciting to think that we may be going on such a positive adventure with the building of a new municipal hall. I think we could probably find some way to retain the other one for some other use while we're doing this. The idea of combining a municipal hall with, be much better for our staff and everybody, but also to have some, perhaps, some sort of affordable housing or rental would be a positive step in the future. And money is going to become available in the not too distant future, certainly after the election in the fall, might make it much easier. Borrowing costs are going to come down. So the concept looks good. I just look forward to seeing what the next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Allen.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm not delighted to see this in front of me today. Some years ago, when we were doing rail planning in Harrison Hot Springs, we recognized that this community hall was not going to be big enough to accommodate the needs of a village of 3,000 residents, which was our design target in those days and maybe still is. Today, that must have been 20 years ago when we started that planning, and we planned that we would have a new community hall to replace this community hall, one that would be big enough to accommodate more of the residents. And it's already proving that in 2024, this hall is not big enough for the village's needs as an assembly hall. And that's why we, the council, when offered the lots lying north of the village office to be bought from the Harrison Hotel, went to the MFA, borrowed the money, spent some of our park land reserve fund on the first 2 lots along Man River Drive, and we purchased that land with the express purpose of building a new community hall for Harrison Hot Springs. We didn't know exactly when it would be built, but we had a good idea of what we needed, and it would be something with at least double the floor space of this hall. We also envisioned perhaps having the post office relocated there and maybe a medical office. But the purpose of buying that land was to provide for a new community hall. And that has been the promise made to people for many years in the official community plan and in our undertakings as a council to the people of Harrison that we would have a new community hall. So I'm very disappointed that this proposal is before me today, which proposes taking away that opportunity and leaving Harrison with no land for a community hall, and instead selling the land off for housing. We don't actually have a housing shortage in Harrison, by the way. Selling the land off for housing and creating a new office building, neither of which I believe are necessary or desirable. So I'm very much opposed to proceeding with this plan, which seems to be the cancellation of our long-held ambition to have a proper community hall that's big enough to accommodate the needs of the whole village. The site that we selected, and which now serves as overflow parking, is ideally located because it lies in the residential area and it's an easy walking distance of the downtown core, so that if we have musical events or festival events or trade shows or conferences in the village, it's still easily accessible to anybody who wants to walk a block to the south. It's a very unique site. It's a very valuable site. It's a public asset that cannot be frittered away. We can always find space for a new administrative building if we need one by relocating the public works yard. We already own 1 acre of land lying alongside Macomb Drive, which we acquired in 1983 as part of the Wask subdivision. And I got the ownership of that 1 acre of land to serve as a backup well site, but there's nothing to stop us from using it to relocate our public works yard or other equipment. And we could still have our community hall on the open space that exists. We could still have our administrative buildings alongside it and connected to it in the north end of the works yard or all of the works yard. And we don't need to sacrifice the opportunity for a real community hall by going with this plan at all. The model that we used back then was partially the conference center built by the city of Penticton, which serves as a community hall and as a conference center and helps to build traffic in the community during the winter months. So I just think that it's frittering away a very valuable asset, and it's contrary to what we have promised people through our community plan for many years, that we would have a new community hall and had planned ahead and made provision for it. And I'm very much opposed to anything that derails that plan. These are commitments we make in the official community plan, are a form of social contract. We make promises to people as to how the village will develop and where future facilities will be. And if we make those promises, I, for one, believe that we should keep those promises. So I'm very much opposed to this suggestion and think that we should revert to, if we are going to do any planning, let's do the planning that says, let's plan for a new community hall. We will eventually sell this site for millions of dollars for somebody else to build condos or something, which will help pay for a new community hall. And you don't need to be on a lakefront site with this hall, because everything happens inside and you don't look at the view anyway. So to capitalize on this asset, whether this becomes sold for money for the construction or becomes a park or a new hot spring pool center in the outdoors in the middle of Harrison, we need to move ahead with a new community hall on the site that we bought for that specific purpose. So I'm opposed to anything that interferes with that plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Vital.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Facio. I'm absolutely thrilled with the prospect, once again, and revisiting this for a new village office. We don't know how many members of the public have had the opportunity to see the cramped quarters of our village office that staff are required to work under, including 2 portable trailers. I really like the idea, and thank you to our operations manager for doing the research of possibly putting rental units and incorporating that into the new building. I do disagree with Councillor Allen that there isn't a housing shortage here in Harrison. There is, especially for those who work in tourism, and to be able to provide that to them at a reasonable, affordable cost, to me is just a bonus. Through you, Deputy Mayor Facio, to Jace, I do have a question. If I could refer to page 6 of the presentation slides, you seem to indicate, or you did indicate, that elimination of that red area on both the first and the second floor would help to bring down costs. Can you just explain to me what in the original design, what was to be included in those red areas? Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Councillor Vidal. Yeah, so those highlighted areas, currently there's multi-purpose meeting room areas. It's just areas that have more space for more community aspects of it. And then also for the upstairs, it was just more space for staff for future growth. There would still be enough room for slight future growth, but long-term planning it is more ideal to have more space for any future staff that needs to be hired by the village.
Thank you, and I believe in the original plan, new council chambers, but also could double as a bit of a theater for community groups, dance recitals, and something like that. Is that still being considered?
That is still could be a consideration. It's still very early on in concept of what's actually needed. So right now it's kind of open for council's direction on how staff should proceed with design or even the land use planning of the entire area.
Terrific, thank you. And Deputy Mayor Facio, I'm in full support of this project. It's time to move ahead with it. So when it does come to a motion to refer back to staff, I will certainly be supporting that. Thank you.
That's, whoops. As some of you will recall, we did apply for funding and did have a design for a new center on the vacant lot, but unfortunately we didn't get the funding, and there was a strong petition around the village against it. So that was tried. In regards to this existing hall, well, this is a hall that has been discussed in the past. It could be rebuilt, could have a proper theater that's required for all the events that go on here, and expanded events as we're a site for festivals and music. And there's no reason why it could even be expanded further out into the street there. So there's options for that as well. We have an opportunity here with the funding that's out there now to create spaces. Now, I can only speak for myself, but over the years, after Harrisburg was built, that if we want to downsize, I'm referring to those in their golden years. If you want to downsize, there's nothing for us here. We would have to move, sell our house and move. And here is an opportunity where, going by just taking as an example the design from Rossland here, that how they accomplish that with a rental unit or units to buy, however it works out under the funding scheme, for folks who want to downsize. And also, as we all know, there's a major shortage everywhere regarding affordable rental. And we have a population here of staff. We're short of staff, actually, in certain areas, accommodations mostly, because they have nowhere to stay. So that's another opportunity to use that vacant space that we have there. The comments of easy accessibility to the beach and the front street, well, that's a perfect location there, where people can just walk. There'll be no driving. The existing office that we have, that would be a perfect location to be leased or rented out, whatever case may be, to our non-profit societies, whoever would want to rent it, or a small library, information, festival of the arts, or anybody that might have that sort of in that category that may wish to rent. So the heritage building would stay, it could be used. And as the operations manager pointed out, that rental from these other units would pay for the costs of the upkeep and the running. So we have a perfect opportunity to do something instead of just a vacant piece of land that we're cutting every day of the week or once a week. And make it in some, where people can live, rent or purchase, if purchase is available, the units. And also have a space there for a decent environmental working space for our staff. As I've mentioned before, it's pretty embarrassing when our staff are bending down to the filing cabinets and you have the washroom virtually next to your shoulder. I mean, we don't have the space. It's outdated. It was gifted to us. It was a great space. We expanded it in 1994 for the 3 offices. But now we're at a point, the village is growing. I'm sure as time goes on, the staff will grow as well. And things are getting more complex, more demanding by the public, and we have to address these things. So we're looking to the future. So from my perspective, I think it's something that we should direct staff to move forward on. But I'll just for one more comment, I'll go around the table quickly with Councillor Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I think sometimes Councillor Allen has what you call selective memory. Back in 2009, the council I was on, we proposed a new development here, which would be a whole new memorial hall with great sound and everything, municipal hall on the top floors, and maybe make it a 4-story building so the top unit eventually could be used for offices or for rental. He led the way against it, against us doing this. There was such a big hubbub in this village because we can't do this. Now he's proposing to sell this land off. Well, I mean, you can't use both sides of the coin. You got to do one or the other. And it just behooves me to sit here to think that we haven't thought of this in the future. Well, we did. And it was opposed by certain people in the community. And we're in a building now that's got terrible acoustics and nothing around the floorboards here, all $900,000 at the time. So we have to move forward, and I'm looking forward to when we go into a new phase in Harrison. Thank you.
Councillor Allen?
Well, again, Councillor Jackson takes the opportunity to take a shot at me. I did oppose the previous proposal because it wasn't really a community hall. It didn't provide any much more space than what we have here, and we need more space. And in fact, this space on the more recent renovation shrank the capacity of the hall by moving that wall to the north. It used to be back there. So we're going in the wrong direction when it comes to providing for the community. I do not see a compromise building with office spaces and residential as being an effective use of that land. We need a bigger, better community hall. And as for the lack of rental housing, if the village was really interested in preserving rental housing, you wouldn't allow the old Harrison Hotel building, which is 12 suites, to be converted to bed and breakfast instead of reasonable accommodation for Harrison residents. And that's happening right under our nose. Even the space that we had that was affordable rental housing in Harrison is being taken away, and the village is not doing a thing to stop that from happening, even though it seems to be a clear violation of the zoning bylaw. So please don't tell me that the village is seriously dealing with the housing shortage. If there is a shortage of worker housing, the Whistler and other resorts will show you how to do it. It becomes the responsibility of the employers, either pooling the resources or individually providing the housing, to ensure that they have housing available for the people they wish to employ. It's not a village taxpayer responsibility to do that. In our case, the Harrison Hotel did in fact have apartment rentals for their staff, including the 12-suite unit that I mentioned behind the corner cafe. and other accommodation on the hotel site. The Harrison Hotel itself gave up and sold off their low affordable accommodation. And they should, if they're concerned about that, should get together with other businesses, form a pool and a housing co-op like they've done at Whistler, and provide some of that housing. It's not the responsibility of the residential taxpayers to look after the business interests of the employers when it comes to employee housing. So I think that this site needs to be kept for its original purpose, which is a community hall, and should not be contaminated with what is proposed here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vital, the last word.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Facio. I am in agreement with searching out some grant opportunities, especially BC Builds. We have to keep in mind that there is a provincial election set for this fall. And I don't know what that outcome will be. I think providing affordable rental housing is not just limited to workers in our resort community. Let's keep in mind, as Deputy Councillor Facio said, that seniors who are wishing to downsize, it would be a good opportunity. Whether they rented or whether they purchased, we can decide that further down the road. But I want to see this project move forward and move forward as quickly as possible. It's been a long time coming and we need to get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And just in closing here, the village did carry out a housing open house, and Whistler, folks from Whistler are the ones that carried this out. We do have a report on the housing status for the village looking into the future. So first I want to thank our operations manager for the report. Thank you very much, much appreciated. So if Councillor Riley, you wanted to make a motion?
Yes, I will make a motion to have a concept of a new village office, including housing, refer back to staff, and for staff to come up with options for design and costing.
Thank you. We don't need a seconder. Question? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Opposed, motion passes, opposed by Councillor Allen. And the next order of business, please.
The next order of business is report of Chief Administrative Officer regarding oak trees on Lillooet Avenue West.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm here today to present council with an updated staff report regarding the oak trees on Lillooet Avenue West. The background has about 2 pages of chronological order of how the trees have been dealt with until today. I'll jump right to the discussion. In their current state, the 4 oak trees located on Lillooet Avenue pose a significant risk to public safety. Despite the issue being discussed by council on multiple occasions, staff has received conflicting direction and require clarification from council. The oak trees in question have been identified with failing health and have become a hazard to pedestrians and nearby properties. Concerns about their stability and potential for failing have been raised repeatedly by residents and council members. The trees were first assessed for their condition and risk factors by a qualified arborist to determine the best course of action, which included options for removal or intensive maintenance. It was determined that the trees posed a clear danger to public safety due to their deteriorating state. Several solutions were proposed, including immediate removal and replacement with safer species or intensive rehabilitation measures if deemed feasible. Despite these initial steps, progress have been hindered by challenges at the council table, which has resulted in the matter not being properly addressed. This has been prevented, has prevented the implementation of necessary measures to address the public safety risk posed by the oak trees. The continued presence of these hazard trees in their current state compromise safety of the pedestrians, motorists, and nearby residents. Potential consequences of inaction could include injury, property damage, and disruption to the community. Staff recommends that council urgently revisits the discussion to resolve the issue of the oak trees. Staff recommends re-engaging a qualified arborist to determine the most appropriate course of action based on the current state of the trees. It is imperative that the council provides further direction to staff on this matter of the oak trees on Lillooet Avenue to prioritize public safety and prevent potential harm. And the recommendations in front of council, there's two of them. Now, the first one is that council directs staff to re-engage a qualified arborist to reassess the oak trees on Lillooet Avenue West, and that council authorize staff to follow the recommendations in the updated report from the qualified arborist immediately.
Thank you. Do you want these separately or together? Excuse me, I'm asking a corporate officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one moment. I'm just, there is a section of our council procedure bylaw with regards to separating motions. Just going to pull that up here. A voting member may request that recommendations be taken separately or together, and the chair will decide whether or not to accede the request. So it is up to you, Deputy Mayor
Okay.
Facio.
Okay, so,
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
excuse me.
I just
Yeah.
need to record my request clearly that these two motions be dealt with separately for the record.
Thank you. So on the first, we'll do these separately. On the first one, the council directs staff to engage a qualified arborist to reassess the oak trees on Lillooet Avenue West. Do we have moved by Councillor Vidal? Discussion, Councillor Jackson?
Discussion, your worship.
Okay. Thank
Yes,
you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep, carry on.
What? Yes, I wish to discuss the motion that's on the floor. Well, I think that's all very well, but the fact remains that we do have a consultant's report, Urban Environment, and Mr. Kyle McGregor wrote that report. And contrary to what was reported to council that the trees should be destroyed, Mr. McGregor was quite clear that the trees are suffering from neglect. They haven't been pruned in 15 years, I think. They need to be pruned and topped and trimmed. There are dead branches in the tree that need to be taken out. One of them broke off and came loose about 3 months ago, and there was a big hue and cry about the danger of it falling down, and fences were erected around the trees. The branch did fall down inside the fences, but any time that you have a tree, particularly one that you neglect and do not manage properly, you will have branches that will die and will fall off it. People parking their cars know that if they park under a tree, there's always that possibility. So I think that we already have an environmental report that says the trees can be possibly saved completely, but certainly you have a much longer, happier life if we spend the few dollars that we haven't spent in 20 years to maintain those trees. And it becomes a responsibility of the village to maintain public trees. We had a report that cost us $7,000 from Mr. Blackwood called the Urban Forest, who clearly said that the village needs to start maintaining its current trees, doing the maintenance, doing the pruning, protecting the roots, and generally taking a more responsible attitude towards them. I have offered to pay for the pruning of these trees. I've offered to pay for the fertilizing of these trees. I've offered to pay for the remediation of the compacted earth around the roots. That is not mentioned in this report. There will be no cost to the village of Harrison Hot Springs if you accept my offer to retain Mr. Kyle McGregor or another environmentalist, and acting under his instructions, have these 4 beautiful oak trees maintained. It's a no-brainer. Our tree preservation bylaw, our OCP policies, and the Blackwood report say that we need more trees, not less trees. And there is no better tree to have than the tree that you have today. Even though it needs a little bit of attention, the wounds can be cleaned up, the dead branches can be taken out, and I would strongly suggest that it be having maintained a lot of trees myself on my own land, on village land over the years, I would strongly suggest that we start by taking about 20 feet off the top of the trees immediately, and then next winter, when they go dormant, do a more thorough pruning and cleanup of the trees themselves. If you do it in 2 phases, there's less shock to the tree. I think that the construction fences which are around the 4 trees are inadvertently doing a really good job, because they're keeping people off the ground underneath the trees, and the little area in there is actually growing grass and becoming quite pleasant. So I would replace those construction fences with a less obstructive fence, maybe something 1 meter high, or even concrete barriers, and protect the understory and the ground area around the trees. And as I have said in letter to the village, I'm prepared to pay for the cost of saving and preserving and extending the life of the 4 historic oak trees on Lillooet Avenue. And I repeat that offer here this morning. We even have money in our budget to do it if the village wants to pay for it. It just needs to be done. They're beautiful trees, they're historic trees. There's only 4 of them left out of 12 that were on that block, and they provide enormous benefits in shade and wildlife and environment to that area and should be preserved. I'll stop talking now because I'm
Thank
not
you, Councillor.
optimistic. Thank you.
I'll call the question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Vital, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Facio. I do support the recommendation. Correct me if I'm wrong, to staff, I believe it was approximately a year ago that the last arborist report was submitted. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. So at that time, the arborist did indicate that there were some serious condition with the oak tree. Nothing has been done in the past year. So I do think that the small cost, I believe it was approximately $1,000 for the arborist report last year. It's a small amount of money to put out in order to get an update on the health of the trees. So I will be supporting that recommendation. Thank you.
Forgetting it. Now, council authorized staff to follow the recommendations in the updated report from the qualified arborist immediately. Is there a mover for this? Moved by Councillor Vital. Discussion, Councillor Jackson in discussion? No. Councillor Allen?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm very much opposed to this motion. It's the responsibility of the council to deal with issues like public trees. I am not at all comfortable about assigning the executioner's axe to any staff member or giving him the responsibility for that. I think that if we are going to get a second arborist report, and I voted against the first motion because I don't think it's necessary. If we are going to get a second arborist report, I would hope it comes from the same person, Mr. McGregor of Urban Environment, so that if it really is an update on a year-over-year condition of the trees, he will know what they were like almost a year ago, it was July, I believe, the 23rd of last year, 11 months ago. He'll be able to tell what has changed with the trees in that time. And if he needs to update his recommendations, he can do so. The decision as to whether or not the trees be preserved should be a council decision and not a staff decision. And it's completely improper to lay that burden on staff and make them responsible for what could be a very unpopular destruction of our last meaningful large shade trees in the whole downtown area of Harrison. So I'm opposed to the second part of this motion because it basically means if the staff goes and gets a tree assessment from somebody somewhere that says cut them down, the chainsaws will fire up and the trees will be gone, and I as a councillor or the public will have had no say in the matter. So I think this is completely wrong to assign that authority to staff without reference back to council. We deserve to know what's going on with our assets. And if we're going to be paying for another environmental assessment of the trees, then we deserve to see what that says. I'm not going to pay for it and then not get to see it like I did with the Timbro contract. So I'm opposed to the motion.
Thank you. Just in previous discussions regards if the trees had to be removed, that would be a new boulevard there with seating areas and shaded trees as well. So it would definitely enhance, which is probably one of the areas that's been neglected in the village, is that part of Lillooet there. So I'll call the question. Did we have a mover? We did, Councillor. Yes, thank you. Call the question. All in favour? Opposed? Motion passes. Opposed by Councillor Allen. And the next order of business, please.
The next order of business is that the Committee of the Whole rise and report to Council, and that Council adopt the report of the Committee of the Whole.
We have a recommendation. Do we have a mover? By Councillor Vidal. Any discussion?
Point of order, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor. We are currently meeting in Committee of the Whole. So we can come out of the Committee of the Whole, but that requires a separate resolution. And I would suggest that we do that and then report to council at the next proper regular council meeting, that we not pass the second part of this recommendation, which effectively gives the public no knowledge of what has happened and denies them the opportunity to see these decisions in a regular council meeting. The corporate officer may disagree with me. She has her hand up.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Allen. That's correct. The minutes will go to a regular council meeting, and upon adoption of those minutes, the decisions of this committee will be ratified.
Correct.
In our procedure bylaw, section 18J, it does say, when all matters referred to the Committee of the Whole have been considered, a motion to rise and report shall be adopted. The committee, when it has partly considered a matter, may report progress and ask leave to sit again. In resumption of regular council business, the chair of the Committee of the Whole shall report to the council, and then it provides a number of options after that. And it says the council may adopt the report, reject the report, adopt the report with amendments, refer subject matter for further consideration, postpone, or approve the request of the committee to sit again. So the adoption of the report when council is rising out of the Committee of the Whole is set out in our council procedure bylaw.
Thank you very much. I'll call the question. All in favour? I'll call the question, sir. All in favour? Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion passes. Opposed by Councillor Allen. And next order of business?
The next order of business is questions from the public.
I will call on Zoom, please. Anybody on Zoom has a question?
Anybody on Zoom have a question, please raise your hand. No questions, your worship.
Nobody on Zoom. Thank you. Please carry on. Thank you. We don't need your name or address. Thanks.
Good afternoon. In regards to Harrison Water Sports, I'd like to address my question on that topic first because I understand they've got a time delay. Has any consideration been given to Harrison Water Sports becoming part of a village lease in terms of operations so that they can move forward? In other words, if they're able to separate their lease from the resort and they become a leasee of Harrison Village. That's my question. My rationale is I would hate to see this business being axed, since we're talking about axes and trees. This business, I had the pleasure of meeting the family last summer. They are hardworking. They care about the community. Their tourist business provides employment for students and young adults, and they are a prime economic driver. I do not think that they are an eyesore to the community. If so, it's a temporary basis. I would much rather see a temporary eyesore than a a full-time RV park in the center of town. So, Councillor Allen. Well, you have your opinion and I have mine. Thank you. You have your opinion and I have mine.
Excuse me, let the speaker finish, please. Excuse me, sir. If you don't
You
mind,
called it an eyesore and I disagree with you.
please carry on, ma'am.
So I would like to see priority given to Harrison Water Sports before priority is given to the Surf Lake proposal. I'm disappointed that the presenters of the Surf Lake were not here to give their point of view. However, that is in benefit for Harrison Water Sports. Thank you. My second question is in regards to the village office. I am very much in favor of a new municipal building being constructed with rental housing above it. Rental housing should be given priority for the tourist workers and the seasonal workers that come here to support our economic force. If someone has their own land and property and they are well endowed with finances, they are not in the same predicament that short-term workers are. So consideration must be given to that first and priority before people have long-term rental housing. So short-term rental housing above the village office, I think that's a great idea. My next question is, has any consideration been given to preserving the old village office and moving it to the boat launch so that that could be converted into a cafe area and further drive the economy of the boat launch area? Thank you.
On your first question, I believe that will be between the village and the province, if there is going to be any lease of any kind. So that's something they deal with. Regarding, I did mention that the existing village office, we've had many requests over the years for that to be used by non-profit societies. And that would be that could be considered, but all considerations we put on the table. Thank you for your questions. Yes, sir.
Good day. I guess I don't need to use my name or address. With your permission, I'd rather make a few comments if your council will indulge that. In regards to Harrison Water Sports, we have in our midst today a professional navigator. That would be Mr. Dunn. Anybody has any questions about Harrison Lake, you should be referencing and asking him. This location that they're proposing is an excellent location, my opinion, right? I spent many years on the lake myself, quite familiar, winds, all sorts. Anyways, the other thought is about the proposed community hall, new city hall, which we are in desperate need of. I agree. I would urge council to always remember what this hall stands for. It's a memorial to our fallen soldiers and their character that should never be lost. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from the public? Yes, Gary Webster, 520 McCombs Drive. I'd just like to ask, have we
discussed anything with Kent about how they are gonna protect us from the south with their dikes? If we're diking up here, flooding can come from the south as well. And I would just like to know if any consultation has been given to Kent.
Yes, the districts of Kent for many years have been lobbying with the provincial government to upgrade their dikes as Abbotsford and Chilliwack, Dewdney, Mission. And I believe there's probably discussions at the emergency meetings regarding protection. But I know that the mayor of Kent, Sylvia Pranger, lobbies continuously for the improving the height of their dikes. Yes.
Deputy Mayor Facio, I will also add to that there is regular discussion at our community to community Let's Amot meetings also.
The C2C community, that they discussed this as well because of the they for many years have wanted to have more what do you call it, removed from the river to lower, so the river would stay lower than higher, but the DFO has always put a stop to that sediment from the river.
Gravel.
So that's been an ongoing discussion for many years, and they're not allowed to go in there. I know many years ago, they said even 300,000 cubic meters would help, but it wouldn't be enough. But it's ongoing discussions continuously, yes.
Thank you. Just one more question.
Yeah.
Or comment. If you do build a new village office, please don't turn it into a hotel motel. The rentals.
That's not the idea. No. Thank you. Yes, sir.
This will be very interesting because thanks to your technical people, the microphones are all coming through a streamer to my hearing aids. And tonight I heard everything everybody said, including things I didn't want to hear. Okay, very quickly. The dike, I think you underestimate the value of the vision of the lake from the dike. And this is just to say, I concur with the idea that divisions 4 and 5 be dealt with separately. It isn't just the people that sit in a restaurant who want to see the lake. And I agree, if you're sitting down, you miss it. But if you stand up right there, yes, you do. In every one of those restaurants. But there's people that walk along Esplanade, people that drive. Right now, when you drive through, you see that view. Please don't underestimate the value of that. And we need a creative solution to how to deal with Division 4 and 5. That was the best suggestion of the night, as far as I'm concerned, on the dike business. With respect to the office space, yes, there's a good plan. There's a need to change. There's a need for certain things. May I urge you, though, not to be tunnel vision on this and just simply focus on facility. There's the space. You own that valuable land, and instead of picking out projects that piecemeal fill in that space, there needs to be an overall plan for the space before you start filling up little chunks and then you can't do anything with it. We need a parkade on there. That's a perfect thing, and you can build above that or below that. There's all kinds of things. So I'm just saying that focus on the space, the whole space. That's a valuable space. Just don't piecemeal, use it up, and then realize, oh, I wish we had done this instead. So I would just say, please go back to that. As far as the trees go, there are 4 trees really are out of place. Councillor Allen was very quick to tell there was no problem in removing a bunch of trees around the existing office. That's okay, they can go. But what we really need, if those trees are gone, I also heard Councillor Allen say we need more trees, not less. From the Aquashores development, what is that, St. Alice? I don't know all the streets yet. All the way down here to Maple, there's a whole section that should be a promenade treed, much the way that Deputy Mayor Fascio had suggested at one time, more trees. But that should be part of a beautiful promenade along the whole district, the whole street. So I'm just encouraging you, there's a different way to look at it. Yes, it might be sad to see the 4 trees go, but they've had their impression, and they're in our core of downtown space. They've had their enjoyment, their life. If the arborist comes in and says, look, there's not much hope for them. Yes, it'll be sad, but they'll be replaced by something much better. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Last question, please.
Sorry about that. If these oak trees come out of there, and I've heard it mentioned a few times about some plan for the area, is this plan on paper or is it just kind of something back?
This was brought up previous council meeting. It is in one of our minutes that would be turned into a boulevard there with possibly seating and excuse me, sir, there'd be no parking on that side, seating and probably some shaded trees as well. Yeah. Okay, just to finish off here, please, councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fascio. I believe the existing resolution also said that if the trees did need to come down, that council would ask to preserve any viable wood from those trees that would be incorporated in that area, whether it's benches or something along those lines. Thank you.
Sort of a memorial to the trees.
Thank you. Call for adjournment. Moved by councillor Vidal. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming this morning. Thank you, staff.